18. That's the age that I graduated high school, and most American students will graduate high school. And at the age of 18, you are legally an adult, which means you can vote, you can take out a lease, you can open a credit card, and you can do all sorts of things that involve money. But most students and kids don't know how that works. If you ask 10 students, I guarantee you only 3 of them would know how interest compounds, how to properly invest, what a high yield savings account is, how credit cards even function. And that is the big problem that I'm going to be discussing today, is the fact that there's a financial illiteracy problem with America and with the school system. And so it's really important to learn about how money works, because me personally, when I learned about how money works, it completely changed my view on how I use and how I spend my money. I now know how to properly budget, how to properly spend, and how to properly save, which is really important because that's going to follow you the rest of your life, these early decisions that you make now. So the problem, like I said, financial literacy. What I think the solution to that should be is that schools should implement a curriculum or add to the curriculum that they already have that includes a financial literacy class, and it should be a basic class. So in this speech, I'm going to go over the problem of financial literacy in more depth, why the education system is how it is and how it has failed, and the solution to the failures that it has posed. So to start off, most students do not understand how taxes work, and they don't understand how credit cards work and how to build a credit, which is really important in the real world. If you ask any adult, I guarantee you they have a credit card open and they'd for sure pay taxes. And that knowledge that these students lack is what leads to students taking out so many loans and ultimately having over sometimes over $200,000 in student loan debts. And that leads to bad budgeting because you're putting so much money towards those student loans, and you end up having to, sometimes to file bankruptcy, and you're left in a really poor situation. And so the knowledge needs to be taught. And according to CNBC, if you take one finance class in high school, just a semester of a finance class, over the lifetime of a person who does that, you will see an increase of around $100,000 on average, and that's from learning how to budget and learning how to properly invest. And that's an extreme amount of money, and that just shows you how important just one little class could be to someone. It could change their whole life and how they view and spend money. Now, another article also by Intuit says that 82% of Americans, and this was done in a nationwide survey, 82% of Americans say they wish they had a finance class, which is crazy. You would think that if over half of people of a nationwide survey say something, it should be done, or it would already be done. But that is just simply not the case. And in fact, in that same survey, 38% people said that they learned finances from their parents. Now, I'm no mathematician, but that leaves another 62% of people with no financial literacy knowledge. And you could say, oh well, they'll go out and they'll learn it themselves. But if you're not inclined to do so, or you have no interest in, why would you do it? I'm not going to go do something I don't have an interest in, because that's just a waste of my time. And for some people, they view that as a waste of their time, even though it's not. And so it's so important that students learn this, because if that number is correct, over 50%, well over 50% of students, no knowledge whatsoever about financial literacy. And that just leads to what I said before about debt increasing and just poor budgeting. And so now we're going to go on to the real problem of why this is, and that's the education system. And the education system, as we know, has a major emphasis on testing. Test. Now, I'm not talking about your math class, a test in your math class, or a weekly quiz. I'm talking about those big standardized testing. This test scores, such as your ACT or SAT, are what schools put such a high emphasis on. And it's unfortunate because colleges do the same. Colleges, most of them, require at least one of the two, either an ACT or an SAT score to even apply to the school. And so many students want to get into these big name schools, but those big name schools and high education schools have high thresholds to meet. And so they spend all this time doing that and focusing on their scores that they just completely neglect any real world knowledge that they need to be learning. And so when they neglect that, that leads to the problems that we face with financial literacy. And according to the article, Why Isn't Financial Literacy Taught in Schools? About in the 20th century, so 1900s, throughout the 1900s, schools put a big emphasis on teaching, like technical skills and academic skills, because they assumed that students would learn their finances from home. But as I just previously stated, over half of Americans don't, which is a major problem. And then also, from the article, Should Schools Teach Financial Literacy? And that was written by Joe Cambrett, about 30% of kids in public schools are able to take a financial literacy class, which is insane. Less than half, only 30% even have the ability to take it, and that doesn't even mean that they're required. And so that's not enough. And unfortunately, there aren't enough teachers in the workforce who want to keep teaching and adding to it. There's a lack of people who want to go teach, but we need to change that, or maybe help teachers switch and learn how to teach this new subject. But that's going to go into my solution, which is, you got to implement this curriculum. And now you don't have to have a master's in business, or you don't have to go to school for business to learn this and be able to teach this. It's pretty simple. All I would suggest is that you learn these four or five basic things. You need to teach how to budget, how to file taxes, how taxes work, how loans work, how interests work, and how credit cards work, and how you build up a credit. Because it's super easy to teach, and the positives outweigh the negatives in a massive way. According to the article, Teaching Kids to Manage Money Yields Big Returns, Daniel Leonard said that a 2020 study found that 18 to 20-year-olds lowered their by 40%, they lowered their chances to fall behind on a payment. So 40% decrease in the ability to not pay, which is insane. And also, those same students found that they had a 25-point increase in their credit scores on average, which is insane. And that not only benefits these students, but it benefits society as a whole. And according to CNBC, they said that teaching students financial literacy in the market is the greatest asset to build wealth in this nation. And so, to wrap up and go over what I was talking about, students graduate at the age of 18, and they can do so many things in the world. They can take out loans, they can take out credit, they can open credit cards, but so many of them don't know how to budget and properly do that. So schools really need to teach financial literacy classes, because that will lead to real-world preparation, and the real-world preparation will lead to economic success for the nation as a whole. And so the problem is clear. There aren't enough classes teaching this, but it's really easy to fix this problem, and America should really focus on fixing this financial literacy problem. Thank you.